foreseeable future, I did see a piece of communication saying we may be a few months. I'm hoping not. It's something that we will continue to keep monitoring, and as soon as it's practical, we would look at going back into a meeting in person. So just to let you know, all know that. So firstly, apologies. Have I got any apologies today?
Kirsten's on the screen now.
Kirsten's there. No apologies. No conflicts of interest?
Yes, Mr. Mill, I'm 8.5. I may have a conflict because I lease land under that system, although it's probably a non-event because I'm going to vote for it anyway, but perhaps we should record it.
Probably be wise, and you'll consider your position on that. Kirsten, just for your benefit, under reactions, if you want to speak, please use the raised hand function because that just pushes everyone to the top. And if you'd like to move or second something, if you could use your thumbs up. So Nikki, did you have a question?
No, I think I've got a conflict on 17.7.
Okay, Nikki.
As might Neville as well.
So 8.5 out. Okay, right, we'll deal with that when we come to those. Just remind me in case I overlook that by accident. All right, so firstly, we've got acknowledgements. We have and they're by way of an obituary. So the first is for Bruce McKeag, formerly an Ayr County Councillor from 1974 to 1989, including the 1987 to 89 period when the Ayr County Council and Rangiora District Council meet jointly every month. So that's the first. And the second, he's not a resident of the district, but Deputy Mayor Atkinson reminded me this morning of Colin Namodio, who's an historian. He's written a number of books in and around Kaiapoi, one around Kaiapoi, Blackwell's, the Tūhoe and the Kaiapoi port, and there may well be others, other ones I could locate. So I'm not going to ask you to all stand, but if we could just observe a moment's silence. Thank you. All right, we now come to the confirmation of minutes. 4.1 is the first. It's the council meeting on the 1st of February. I understand, Deputy Mayor Atkinson, you have a correction to be recorded there. You can unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're just on page 19, table 10 on 4.1. It says there, and I'll try and bring it up. It says there that I voted against, and then the division said that I voted for. I clearly voted against.
Yes, I recall you doing so. So in a minute, is there any other corrections, Councillor Barnett? Are you indicating?
Yes, on page 6 of the minutes, it said that I'd stated there were no other 30km/h areas in the district, whereas I'd actually said no other 30km/h except at the beach settlements.
Okay, well, I'm happy to accept your word on that. So with that, if there's any other corrections, Deputy Mayor Atkinson and Councillor Barnett, are you happy to move the reception of these minutes? Yes, with those corrections. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Just indicate with your hand. Anyone opposed? Declare those minutes accepted or confirmed. The next is item 4.2, which is the minutes for confirmation of the 2nd of February, which was our annual plan deliberations. Councillor Redmond. You've got two thumbs up.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to delete them.
So you don't have anything, Councillor Doody? You just need to unmute, Wendy. I can't hear you. Sorry. You're okay? All right. So someone prepared to move? Seeing as you've got multiple hands in the air, Councillor Redmond, you're moving. Seconded by Councillor Ward. Any discussion? I'll put those. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Any matters arising? Okay. The public excluded minutes, will deal with that when we go into the PX agenda. I have no deputations or presentations for today. Just noting adjourned business there, which is to do with development contributions that will be dealt with on the public excluded agenda. I'm just checking, can you all hear me okay? Good. So now we come to number 7, which is the shovel ready project 7.1. So Tia, are you going to let Colin into the meeting, is that correct?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairperson. Are you skipping adjourned business, item 6?
Well, it's dealt with in public excluded. So
sorry. Yeah.
It's okay, no trouble. But thank you for checking, keeping me on my toes, which is excellent. So it's Colin Roxburgh now and Rob Kerr.
Yeah, they are coming in now.
Thank you. So that's pages 72 to 79, everyone. It's tab 5 in Diligent. So Colin and Rob, we'll leave this in your hands. Who wishes to speak?
Hi everyone. I'll speak and Colin will fill in. I've only just joined the meeting, so I'm hoping I'm joining at the right time to speak to the stimulus program paper.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
Excellent. So this paper is what should be the final paper that you see in relation to the stimulus program of work. Of course, you'll recall that this is based on the $8.02 million grant from the Crown in relation to the Three Waters reform process, plus additional funding that you committed from both level of service and development contributions towards a program of work that covers, I think it's 10 construction jobs plus another 4 or 5 operational and non-construction works. So total budget is 10.605 to date, but our recommendation is to consider that as we've completed all tendering and we were aiming it up pretty nicely to meet all budgets, but the last tender, the Loburn-Lee-Ashley wastewater main, which is the last stage of the Loburn-Lee scheme, came in over the engineer's estimate with only a single bid. It's about 150k over budget, and that's how much over budget the overall program is. So with the unders and overs and of the different projects, both overall, but more particularly by funding source as well, everything's able to be covered except for that $150,000. Now, you may recall, and Colin will be able to explain this better than I can, that when you approved the overall program, there was a mechanism put in place for some the benefiting schemes to provide a return to the schemes they were joining and to the overall rating base. So that was originally set at $560,000. It gives some room to manoeuvre for the inherent uncertainty in the overall program cost, and so our recommendation is for you to consider that redistribution is reduced to $409,000, and the $151,000 is moved to the Loburn-Lee budget to be able to deliver that last section of work. You have other options, of course. The options is not to do that work or to consider other budgets that you may wish to move around. However, from a staff perspective, we'd recommend that this is the best approach because it's work that needs to be done. that is my story, and happy to answer any questions, and Colin may wish to fill in some additional information as well.
Thanks, Colin. Do you want to add anything?
No, I think Rob's done a great job, so I'll just help respond to questions if needed.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey, could you please mute yourself?
No, because last time I did, I couldn't come out of it again.
Okay,
so
all right.
I'm scared to try.
Okay, fair enough. Questions. So if you would like questions or want to speak, please use the reactions, the raise hand function. So is there any questions? Yes, I can see you raising your hand there, Councillor Ward. Councillor Ward, followed by Councillor. So Paul, could you use the, under reactions, use raise hand, which is at the bottom. It just pulls you to the top, then I know you're there. Thank you. But I'm noting that you're asking a question.
Yeah, the question is that with these tenders going out and the work that has to be done, are we going to get these all done in a timely fashion so that we can maximise the funding?
So the answer is yes. All works, subject to your decision today, are on schedule to be completed by the due date in the funding agreement, which actually changed across the country until June June this year. But we're well in advance of that. And in fact, we're well in advance of, we've almost spent $8 million already. If we haven't already, we may have this month. I haven't done the figures yet. So we're not at risk, in my view, of breaching the funding agreement.
Thank you, Will. Yep, I'll vote for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, hi. The Logan Lee, the growth scenario, an extra 1.47 million. There was nowhere near that originally. Have we actually got that growth happening, or is that just where's that 1.4 mil come from?
Colin, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the table under recommendation B. We're not proposing any changes to that growth budget. It's so the August 2021 budget, which was the last time we looked at these, was 1.47. The proposed budget is still 1.47. So that hasn't changed since August. So yeah, we're not looking to make up any difference by changing the growth budget. So we had part of our consideration with that is making sure that, well, partly the growth has to reflect the growth funding has to reflect the benefit of the project split between growth and the existing ratepayers, but also it has to be at a level where the resultant development contributions are affordable, that they're not going to prohibit growth happening. So I think, yeah, that was our view back then, and it still is, that that's about the right amount of growth funding, and the development contributions are also in line with other schemes. And we have had interest from developers about growth in that area. So within the lifetime of this, yeah, we definitely expect to recover that over the coming years.
Thanks, Colin.
So how many?
Sorry, you have further question, Councillor Williams?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to know how many years we expected before we try to start recovering some of this money. Is it a 1 year, 2 year, or 10 years?
It's within, it could be up to 10 years to recover, so it's not necessarily immediate, but that's very common for projects like this that have a growth element to them. Some of it could be sooner. We had one developer last year who was really keen to get things underway as soon as possible. I haven't heard of that's progress since, but there's definitely in general a lot of interest from developers to wherever land is zoned for growth to go ahead and do it. But we always try to be a little bit conservative and allow a longer time period.
Thank you. I see Councillor Mealings, but just to remind everyone, can you please use the raised hand function? So it's in, looks like that, that's on in the reactions, because when you use yours, Nikki, it just looks like you're waving or clapping in support. it's the raised hand function that pushes you to the top, and I know that you want to ask a question, if that's all right. Just like Councillor Atkinson has. Well done. There we go. Thank you. Councillor Mealings.
Maybe I should have my glasses on. Jeepers. Sorry about that, guys. I was like, why did that keep disappearing? But there you go. Everybody can make a faux pas on Zoom.
We're all getting used to this mechanism again, right?
Yeah, what I wanted to ask was, has this project increased by 416,000 over the extended budget, for which the 255K was added back in August, or is it 416 over the original budget? Does that make sense? For Loburn Lee.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it would be fair to say that we have had a number of challenges on this construction project. It's a very long pipeline, and certainly the estimates probably went up to where we would hope to in terms of levels of accuracy from the initial first cuts. So the 416 is in addition to the increase at the last in the August meeting. So part of those increases is caused by increased scope, the amount of work that needed to be done, particularly around services and some of the ground conditions. But I think it reflects the market conditions that we're seeing at the moment. Certainly, there are to have received one tender for a relatively normal job like this, a pipeline job like this, is unusual.
Enough, thank you.
Okay, further questions? We have a series of recommendations that some are prepared to move. Don't all put your hands up at once. Councillor Bryan, yep. Will move, seconded by Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Bryan.
Well, we've heard a pretty clear staff report and good questions, good answers, nothing further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to speak? Any further speakers? You can exercise a right of reply to yourself if you like, Councillor Bryan. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hands. Contrary. Declare that carried. So thanks, Rob and Colin. The next is, there's another item that will follow in the PX, which is listed there, which is we'll deal with in public excluded. The next is 8.1, which is land acquisition. So that's tab 6, pages 80 to 127. Chris is there. So we've got Chris speaking to this report. Hi, Chris.
Kia ora, everyone. So this report refers to land acquisition of a parcel of property, which is deeds land next to 260 Revels Road in Kaiapoi. This piece of land forms part of the Arohatea Te Awa first project, which looks to create a loop around what we sometimes call the horseshoe on the Cam River. The eventual plan looks to link Kaiapoi and Rangiora with a recreational track that they can use following the Cam River to get from Kaiapoi to Rangiora and vice versa, along with some planting, riparian planting and biodiversity enhancement. We've already started the project. There's been significant amounts of consultation with nearby residents who we are getting quite a bit of support from now. We've planted many thousands of plants along another part of the Cam River, which forms part of this walkway. Originally, when we looked at the piece of land in question, we were working with the landowner at the time of 260 Revels Road, and we had it surveyed and found that there was quite a large portion which was in this deeds land ownership as opposed to the person at 260 Revels Road. They weren't managing their fences particularly well. There was stock getting in the river, etc., etc. The surveyor, as you'll see from the report, did a very thorough job on getting all of the historical records, and they determined that it was road reserve. We subsequently, after sending the plans to LINZ, were told that while the intention in 1870 something by the owner at the time was for it to be given to the council as road reserve. There's no evidence to suggest that the council at the time or the authority at the time ever actually accepted it, so therefore it remains as deeds land. We have been working with Sheehan at Corcoran and French to try and massage Lynn's into taking a pragmatic view on the ownership or status of the land. He's been unable to do that. So our next step is to compulsorily acquire the land using the Public Works Act, and I've put in the report a process of how that would, how we would go about doing that. So I'm looking for council support in order to go through that process, which is required as part of that process. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Thanks, Chris. Questions? Councillor Blackie?
Yeah, hi, Chris. Having been involved with one of these, as you know, and you were back in the day at Silverstream Reserve here, two questions. Where are we up to with discussing what you intend to do with the current owners at 260? And I understand it changed hands, didn't it, quite recently? Do the current tenants start again? When the current tenants bought it, were they made aware that this project was in the pipeline?
Yeah, so we've gone out and met with the current landowner, and I've only owned the piece of land for probably 3 or 4 months now. They have been, previously we'd actually got to the stage of actually having a license to occupy for the previous owner, based on the fact that part of their garage is actually on the land, which is now considered deeds land. So we gave them that license to occupy and said, if we go through this compulsory acquisition process, then we'll have to give you a license to occupy for part of your garage as well. We had a good walk over the site, and they were fully supportive. They actually come from an environmental background, hold a position in an authority nearby where they are looking after biodiversity and waterways, etc. So they told us that they'd killed 19 possums on the piece of land since they'd been there, and were fully supportive and wanted to do a whole bunch of stuff to actually support the project going ahead. So they were very supportive. Haven't contacted the agents of the previous owner of the deeds land, because that might be really hard, seeing as though no one's been interested in it since 1874.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Bryan?
So I was just a little confused with this report, and sorry, Chris, I didn't ring you yesterday. There's no other option than the process that you're proposing?
So there are other options. One of the options would be to look to bridge the Cam River to make sure that the recreational walkway can get to the other side. Of course, the cost of doing that is huge. It also means that we'll have a piece of land which is sitting next to the Cam, which remains deeds land that we don't have any power to actually plant plants, protect, make sure that the banks aren't eroding into the river, etc. So regardless of whether we actually create a walkway, we'd still like to have control over the piece of land to make sure that the primary objectives of Arohatia Te Awa, which are water quality and biodiversity enhancement, are achieved as well. The other option would be to just start somewhere else with the Arohatia Te Awa project. Start on the other side of the river, all the way from Kaiapoi. We do have issues there with the likes of the mill and other land ownership issues where there isn't actually a piece of deeds land at all, and people own right up to the edge of the river, which means that we can't get there, can't plant plants, etc. So we've looked at all the options, and we believe that this is the best one to be able to continue with Arohatia Te Awa.
I guess where I was coming from was more in the money sense. This has cost us and will cost us.
Yep.
Does money come into the equation? I know the ownership's in dispute, but cannot the ownership be bought?
Well, it's deeds land, so there's no one essentially to buy it off. So the process is identified in the report, but they have to go through first of all and try and find out who the agent is for the land, and that might mean going back to 1870 and then following a reasonably wiggly line through to someone that might exist today. And that takes a little bit of research and time. The process which has been identified in the report, you will note that it says partially complete on a number of those, because we have done a very detailed investigation with the surveyor. So we don't need to do any of that work again. So that will reduce the cost. But yeah, there's always a process around deeds land. If we could find the owner ourselves, which is unlikely, and then look to buy it off them, it might be cheaper, but I don't think that's going to be likely.
Further questions? So we have a thank you.
Happy to move.
So Councillor, so hold on. So I've got thank you. I note you're moving, Councillor Stewart. So I've got Councillor Redmond, Councillor Mealings. Oh, you're happy to second, right? Do you have a question there, Councillor Atkinson? Right. So Councillor Redmond first, followed by Councillor Atkinson.
No, I was going to move or second, but I've been beaten to the punch.
Okay. Councillor Atkinson?
Aye.
Okay, so Councillor Stewart's moved, seconded by Councillor Mealings. Councillor Stewart, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, Mr. Brown's report outlines the issue in front of us and includes, as you'll see, those fascinating old maps. So there's been quite a lot of research go back to get us to this point. I find it quite extraordinary that a reserved road, which guaranteed public access in the subdivision survey back in 1860, is not actually recognised by LINZ at this point in order to be able to carry out that purpose, because there's no evidence that it transferred over to a local authority at the time. And you have to ask the question, well, I certainly did, was who else was going to fulfill this purpose and maintain it to enable public access through the area. So that's why we're at where we're at, and the Public Works Act gives the council the ability to see the strip of land, and it's 10 metres from the river edge along the accompanying the boundary adjoining the boundary of 260. So it's a sliver of land. So the Public Works Act enables the council to fulfil the original purpose, plus complete the first section of track coming from Kaipoi up to the Rebels Road bridge, and deliver the benefits to the river and the riverbank environment. As Mr. Brown said, there's stock getting into the river along the stretch, and a fence along the boundary of 1860 will enable that to not occur again, and us to enhance the riverbank environment with native plantings, so and enable everybody to enjoy it. So I encourage everybody to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Mealings, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please. Yes, well, being privileged to sit on the Arohati Atiawa committee alongside Councillor Stewart as chair, it's been a really interesting process to see this all unravel. It was quite a shock, I suppose, to find out that this land in question was deeds land in the first place, and we had hoped for an easier path to get the land into a proper state that we could do what needs to be done with it. But this is a very important project. It's already well underway. We've got residents that are honestly have been really good to work with. We couldn't ask for better people living in the land in question at the moment. And the fact that LINZ will not be massaged, as Chris put it, into making this a little bit of an easier path is disappointing, but considering that this is our only way forward, I do hope that you all will all consider the recommendation, because otherwise it puts what is an excellent project at risk, and I think we'd all hate to see that. So I hope you'll support it. Thanks.
Councillor Doody, did I see you put your hand up there? Councillor Doody, followed by Councillor Bryan. You might want to unmute Wendy.
This was extremely interesting to read, and I'm so fascinated by the deeds, the writing, the way they've done it. It's just incredible with the beautiful handwriting. And what I could read, it was very interesting to read through the that part of history back and being in March 1889. So how interesting. Thank you. So fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is prefaced on the only in about at less than 5 occasions have we ever had to use this process to acquire land, and I find it unfortunate that we're having to go this way. This makes perfect, complete, and absolute common sense, and it's just jolly unfortunate that it's we've had to go this way.
Thank you. Well, I'm also going to support this. I agree with Councillor Bryan. I'd rather we're having to go via Public Works Act, but having been involved in some other areas that involve deeds land, it's a very difficult exercise. So really, we really don't have any other choice. Can I just really like to acknowledge and thank Councillor Stewart for her leadership in this area. I think she's doing a superb job. And I fully support this, because I think the work's been done, and the report itself, Chris, very thorough and explained it really well. So thank you for the work. It's an area that I think we can be very proud of our achievements here. And again, thank Councillor Stewart and others who are involved in supporting this project. Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is something that's fascinating to retired lawyers and historians. It's a very comprehensive report, and the deed system is a can of worms. There are other ways of treating it, but they're not simple. They're convoluted and time-consuming. So this really is one way to hit it on the head and resolve the issue. And I think it will be cost effective too, compared with the other alternatives. And there are little patches of land like this throughout the district, and I personally find it quite fascinating.
Thank you, Councillor Redmond. Any further speakers? Surprise reply, Councillor Stewart, if you'd like.
No, all good.
Thank you. I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thank you. Right, we now come to 8.2, which is the, thanks Chris, the Housing Working Group Interim Report. Mr Markham, that's pages 128 to 253, tab 7. Thanks, Simon.
Good afternoon, councillors. So this is, as highlighted, an interim report, covers many aspects of the housing topic. Tried to layer the information from the main report to a number of attachments, and really tries to do two things: give you, as the whole council, a sense of the progress and directions of inquiry of the group, and secondly, the matters that will come before you, such as the Greater Christchurch housing strategy, and recommends that those relevant to the housing topic be brought to the working group to provide you in turn with advice in an integrated way on those matters. So with that introduction, I'm pleased to answer any questions, and it may be that Councillor Atkinson, as chair of the group, or other members of the working group may wish to make some introductory remarks as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Atkinson, would you like to make any introductory remarks? You can unmute yourself if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've troubles here with a mouse that seems to be crawling all over the place. I don't know whether it's been rat poisoned or not, but look, this group. Just to let everybody know that this group, we've worked pretty hard to get to this stage, and as you can see by the report, it's quite encompassing of a whole raft of things, and we are really at a reasonably interim stage of getting through it. We've worked with some people and gaining information, and we intend to work with a lot more and gain information as we go along before we get to the next report, which hopefully won't be too far away. Simon might give some indication of when he thinks that may be assembled in months to come. But we are getting there. There is an awful lot of demand in this space, and it has very, very many tentacles that go out everywhere into the community, and then again, as Simon has indicated, will feed into the GPS as well as what we need to do in our own community. We have some focuses, as you can see that in the report there, in the interim report, that we're focusing on, and I think they will narrow by the next report reasonably quickly, and we'll actually have even a better indication for you in the next few months. But Simon, you may have a view on about how long you think that we will be.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, I think there are a number of smaller work streams within this topic area that will progress quite quickly, as Councillor Atkinson has indicated. I think the working group is keen to be able to make some recommendations to you sooner rather than later as to the best way of allocating the funds reserved in the housing space that the council does have, remembering those are out of sale proceeds of former community housing. And I think that's a priority to get an appropriate delivery option before the council as soon as practical in that space. Others will take a little bit longer. The staff are subject to your deliberations on this report. Staff will be working up an implementation program for the various actions that are foreshadowed in it, and that will come back as a matter apart from discussion by the Housing Working Group at its next meeting coming up soon in March. It could be circulated to full council to give you an indication of timeframes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Barnett, followed by Councillor Bryan, and then Councillor Doody.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simon, I'm just wanting to tease out the budget issue that's been put in here of the 35,000 being brought forward. Why wasn't that raised at the annual plan deliberations and has been brought to March Council?
So I think the full breadth of the program implications of the Housing Working Group's interim report just wasn't available at that time as we went into the budget, and it has, in discussion with the Housing Working Group, there's a desire to make progress, and we do have a significant resourcing implication in the property unit, which is limiting that in the short terms. Hence that rather than waiting until the 1st of July to begin recruitment for that new position, there's a preference expressed to advance that sooner rather than later.
So supplementary to that, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that it actually came about, Councillor Barnett, through a suggestion of the panel to recommend this, because there is some ambition around this program, but there is staffing measures there. We did discuss that very briefly with the CE, and it just required this to come as a way of, sorry, there's a noise coming in there from somewhere, around that amount be brought to this panel. Ordinarily, yes, we would wait until July, but given the ambitions, it was felt that it would be appropriate to bring here, and that could be just deficit funded until July, because there were a number of positions proposed through, 2 positions proposed through the annual plan in any event. So it was just bringing that partially forward. But that's up to the meeting today to decide.
Thank you for answering. Just then supplementary to that, my original understanding of the Housing Working Group was it was formed to distribute the funds that we had available from the sale of property, and also to look at our long-term strategy for our elderly housing and the rental units we had. Why has the scope suddenly been broadened so much, reading through the documentation, to become part of the Greater Christchurch housing strategy when Christchurch City Council has a completely different portfolio and involvement in housing than Waimakariri District Council?
I could offer a couple of comments in that regard. Firstly, the terms of reference of the Housing Working Group, which are attachment 1, have 5 work streams, 5 objectives, and we've reported, and the working group has reported against all 5 of those. And that is inclusive of the matters that you raised, Councillor, but it was on its formation in May last year, had a rather wider brief than I think you are referring to. And secondly, the Greater Christchurch housing, social and affordable housing work stream is a matter that is going to come to the council regardless of whether there is a housing working group or not. That was initiated through the Greater Christchurch Partnership. I think the recommendation before you is that, and you're going to get a briefing on that, I think, on this coming Thursday, but a full document in due course, that the appropriate course of action recommended is to refer that to the working group so that it can be cognizant of what is being proposed at a Greater Christchurch level and provide this council with advice in terms of what might be an appropriate response to that from a district perspective.
So final question, Mr. Mayor. Given that central government since 2011 has been pushing local government out of social housing area, including the income-related rent subsidy being removed from local government and Kāinga Ora's role being stepped up, why are we now being asked to provide such actual resources towards funding a role to do with housing, which is clearly comes under the central government taxation portfolios?
A couple of comments in relation to your remarks. Firstly, local government have never enjoyed the income-related rent scheme that was created principally to support the development of the community housing sector. That is, and it's not a criticism, but it's an observation, there is very little community housing in the Waimakariri district. But you are right, the government in the general sense over a very long period of time, and its successive governments from the early 1990s have been rather parsimonious about local government's role in housing, and as a consequence, this council, along with many others, are the custodian of a number of elderly persons housing units, a portfolio of 112 in the case of Waimakariri, but most of there's about 50 councils in New Zealand with between 100 and 300 EPH units. The question is, and it's addressed in some of the work that's included in this report by way of attachment, looking out longer term in terms of the pattern of household demand for housing by age and household size, there's a clear strategic direction of demonstrable needs in the older, smaller household sector that is unlikely to be provided by the market. Now, fortunately, Kāinga Ora has moved from what was a principal focus when it was a housing corporation on 3-bedroom family housing and is a provider in that space. The question that is before us, though, is with very rapidly rising waiting lists, there is a general shortage of social housing, full stop.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you. I'm assured it was coincidental, but last week I received an email from Velda Rivoli, and I posed some questions to Rob, and thank you very much, Rob, for getting back to me. And I hadn't read this report at that time. My question is, what do you expect those reserves to ultimately be that we can invest in social housing?
I've got a comment on that, but it may well be that members of the Housing Working Group would also want to reply. my
Sorry,
expectation.
Simon.
Sorry.
Carry on, Simon.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I think there's a desire to see them reinvested principally in the elderly persons area. They're aware of the Abbey Fields option that for which there is now a local group, well organised, and I believe they will be coming to present to the Housing Working Group at its next meeting. The question of the particular form of housing that Abbey Fields is promoting is one option in the elderly person space, and I'm sure that will get a good consideration at the next Housing Working Group meeting. Thank you.
Rob, did you want to add anything there?
Well, no, I was just curious.
Robbie, can I just check if Rob wanted to add anything to that? Rob Hawthorne. Rob, do you want to add anything to the answer?
Only that I think the question was what sort of quantum of dollars, if that was the question. It's approximately 2.5 million. Now that's the equity. There is potential in a sustainable way to have a somewhat greater spend than that in terms of being able to borrow against the asset. But in terms of the cash that came out of the sale of those properties, about 2.5 million.
Thank you. No further questions that I can see. But did you have a question there, sorry, I saw you put your hand up there, or a wave there before Wendy. Councillor Doody, did you have a question?
No, it wasn't a question. I was just going to make a comment when they asked what the rest of the housing unit want to.
What I'll do is we'll come to debate shortly. But if you want to add anything in there and members of the other housing working group, you're welcome to now. Otherwise, if we could save it to debate, we can have it there, but I'm happy to encourage to let you speak if you wish.
Thank you. Yes, also it's been a very interesting time looking at all this with working with the housing working group. Sadly, because of COVID, some of us didn't get to see the one or two projects that could have been interesting to refer to, and one of them, of course, was the projects that Robbie just spoke about a few moments ago. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see that. But also there was one in Peterborough Street I would have liked to have been able to have a little look at. But unfortunately, COVID does tend to interrupt things a bit. So hopefully we'll be able to one day go and have a look. Thanks.
Thank you. Robbie, did you have another question, or have you just still got your hand up? No. Okay. Councillor Atkinson, did you wish to?
I was just happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So, any further questions? So, moved by Councillor Atkinson. I think that means you wanting to second, Councillor Doody. Yes. Okay. That's moved and seconded. Would you like to speak, Councillor Atkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this has been an interesting committee that we've all been on and grappled with at times. What's the involvement? Where's it going? What sort of money have we got to invest? Expectations from the community, which are very high, and think we will invest in all manners of social housing. And you can probably imagine just about everybody wants us to invest in their project. And of course, as it should be, every area in housing is something that people are incredibly passionate about. Councillor Barnett raises the fact of whether we should be involved, how we should be involved. That's exactly what we are looking at, and exactly under the delegations what it is that we need to be doing. It may come out at the end of the day that, apart from the investment money that we have, that there may be something completely different that's needed at the end of this. And I'm not sure that there is ever an end in housing. I think it's always the start of the end of the beginning, no matter where you head in it. Abbey Fields, yes, they did come and see us. Wendy's right about Peterborough Street. We've got Kaianga Ora. We've had a company called Modus who have come and seen us. We have several more in which we wish to hear from. In Tessa's space, I think there's about, I suppose a nod, Simon, about 14 different groups in which she's dealing with in the social housing, and it goes from intellectually handicapped right through again to Kayang Ora mentioned again. So it's a pretty complex area, and it's getting worse as the days goes on as far as complexity goes, because the rise and questionably the fall in rentals, typology that people need to live in, all of those things, it changes day by day. So we need to keep up with that. We started from well behind. We had our pensioner units, and we had the 7 homes in which we sold, and obviously where the money has accumulated from. So we haven't looked at that, apart from, and Rob and I were involved in the original group that bought those 7 homes originally. Apart from that, and what Rob Hawthorne has done recently with the pensioner housing, we haven't looked at this for a very, very long time, and we're playing catch up. So what I am asking is that you support this interim report and help us through to continue to gather information and inform you what it is that we will need to do, hopefully in the very near future, with the money that we have, but also in assisting the community, whether it should be government, whether it should be us, and some advice coming back to you that we can all put our stamp on to move forward in this space.
Thanks, Councillor Atkinson. I have Councillors Doody, Redmond and Barnett. And as I said before, if you could please use the reactions as Councillor Barnett has, then I saw the order in which you're raising things, but raising your hand helps me to know who's there. So if you do that, please. So Councillor Doody as seconder.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Atkinson's quite correct in what he was saying with that we've been grappling with this. And as a portfolio holder of pensioner housing, I was a bit appalled at the conditions of some of those pensioner housing. And I will say thank you to Rob and his team for getting in and making sure some of those pensioner housings are up to scratch now and to be a healthy home for them all. So we are really falling behind and we do need to step up. But just as to how much we do step up and who we look after, that is something for council to actually grapple with in the long term when we put our final recommendations together. But it is a very interesting working party to be on, and so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doody. Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also a member of the committee, and it has been a very interesting process. And I'd like to congratulate Simon and the staff for the report. The area just grew from what I first anticipated it may have been, and it is a very broad area. I'm hopeful, as I think Councillor Atkinson indicated, that we may focus on some specific areas in the not too distant future. But I think this is a very good interim report, a very comprehensive set of recommendations, and I'm happy to support them. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Redmond. Councillor Barnett.
Just one question first, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible to take section M, which is the budgetary item, separately?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Just speaking to this, housing is an absolutely critical item in New Zealand at the moment, and we see it every day on the news. I have utmost sympathy for people who are struggling to find housing, and I do feel the government has failed to look at the ageing demographic of our community. But we have to look quite clearly at what our role is under legislation, and it's not clear that we are supposed to be spending ratepayers' money in this space. Traditionally, council's role has always been a regulatory function. We have the Resource Management Act, the Building Act, the Health Act, And we are supposed to try and encourage infrastructure and incentivise development by private providers providing private capital to build the appropriate housing in our district. We're also there, and I totally support facilitating other social providers to provide housing models in our district, very much like the rest of our community team activities, where we facilitate social services, but we don't run them, and we certainly don't fund them. I was really, really quite surprised to see a budgetary item come to us in March when we just considered the annual plan back in January, and that hadn't been indicated that any budgetary item would go in regarding housing when we haven't actually consulted with our community as to how much of their rates they would like to spend on housing in our district. One of the reasons Waimakariri hasn't been very involved in social housing is we have a very high rate of home ownership. I think it's around 86%, Simon, somewhere around there. So we haven't had the demonstrable need that Christchurch City Council and other councils have of very high levels of need in social housing. We also don't have the staff who can accommodate looking after people who need other wraparound services in social housing. And the government has taken away our mechanisms to fund it easily and has pushed that back to the community sector. So I very much saw this role as looking at the money we had that was dedicated in the budget to already existing houses, and there seemed to be a general consensus around council that the need was going to be an elderly person's housing. Facilitating all the other agencies in our district who are working to provide housing for our residents, and being that go-between with information, supporting infrastructure and so on. I've never agreed to us spending other money on extra staff to facilitate social or affordable housing in our district. I believe that sits in the community team and partly in the housing team who looks after our pensioner house units. So I will be voting against the budget provision simply because I think the 17A review, where we consult with our community about what they want in terms of our housing policy, should have been done first. We need to know what the public want us to spend in housing before we add anything extra to the budget and pull budget forward a couple of years. So that's the only reason I don't support it. I'm totally for us facilitating housing initiatives in our district, but I think it should come out of taxation, not out of our rates.
Councillor Bryan, then I'm going to speak as a member of the Working Party. Councillor Bryan, please. Thank you.
To a degree, I agree with Councillor Barnett's comments. However, having said that, we have long been investors in, and it's not so much pensioner housing, because there are people in our housing at the moment that are not pensioners, but certainly we have been social providers, and to a very high standard. And that account is pretty much paying for itself. The reason why I'm going to fully support this is the sale of the houses, which I was against. But having said that, I respect the decision, and I want to see that $2.5 million well spent. If our staff identify a lack of resource or ability to well spend that $2.5 million plus, hopefully there'll be others that come on board as well. If they need the resource to well spend that money, I'm going to fully support this recommendation.
Thank you. And look, all speakers have spoke well in this space. There's some really good points that have been made, but can I firstly acknowledge Councillor Atkinson for his leadership. It has been probably one of the more interesting, I think one of the most interesting committees I've sat on for a long time. And I think he's led it really well, supported ably by Simon and the other staff that have been there, because this is an area where we could have been so broad in what we were doing. And in fact, you have to go out and have a good look to understand what the need is. And we are going to need to land at some stage on effectively making a choice in this space. We did go out and at the invitation of Abbeyfield, and did Councillor Atkinson, myself and Rob, and have a look actually. And you can't help but be impressed with the model that they've developed there, but it's one that we need to make sure that we've properly researched in the partnership and what that means. But there's others like the Peterborough model, and there's other models in the private sector as well. And they're well documented, those particular models, and Tessa's run a couple of forums where it's been interesting to talk with other providers and to see where the private sector's at in their support of this. But what it needed doing is tightening this up back to our terms of reference, and that's what it does here, and clearly articulates the direction of where we wish to travel in this space. It's fair to say we've all been ambitious. We want to see a result. We could spend that $2.5 million multiple times, actually. Wouldn't be difficult to do so. And we have land where we can partner, and that's the critical aspect of M that's needed. We do need some work done on this, because if we don't, that's why I support bringing the budget forward, because we asked our staff at the last meeting, who are under a lot of pressure in this space, that, you know, what's going to need to make this work. And it's not just this, it's the acquisition and disposals group as well that needs some support. Now, Rob and his team are under a lot of pressure. So bringing this forward actually is something that I'm fully supportive of doing, so we achieve and realise the aspirations we're setting. I don't think there would be many in our community that disagree with that, and there may well be, but that's I fully support that direction because it needs that work done. The other thing that's changed around the question around the Greater Christchurch Partnership is actually the Urban Growth Partnership, which we now have agreed or are working on the final stages with the government, and that's a real game changer. We're going to have two ministers sitting at the table, Ministers Woods and Mahuta, and who knows where that heads, but hopefully means further investment in our communities. We've already seen Kaingaora come to us. They're very keen to partner. Let's see where that takes us. There's a lot going on in this area, and we need to be in a position as a district to take on those opportunities when they come along. And they're there waiting for us to make the right noises to them. Let's see where that goes. The other thing is that if we're talking about the future, it's actually in this space, the future for local government and the work that's around that. This is actually in the area that we may well end up having a lot more influence in, depending on where that goes. And it's our decision ultimately, in our communities ultimately, how much we wish to be involved or not, as the case may be. And that's around the 4 wellbeings and the other matters that we have that opportunity and scope to add if we wish. We do have a good record with social housing in this district, but we could do so much more if we really were of a desire to do so. And what this working group is doing is putting in place a structure that then will report back to council with those options, and it'll be up to council to make that final decision. So again, I'd just like to acknowledge Councillor Atkinson, all the members of the working group who are contributing and doing a really good job in this space, supported ably by our staff. It's got my full support. Who are the speakers? Deputy Mayor Atkinson, do you wish to exercise the right of reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, there's a bit of a chicken and egg here. The reason we need to fund this position is so we can get to an end, and we may end up exactly where Councillor Barnett has talked about, that it becomes a government issue. We've been, and Councillor Bryan's absolutely right. We have invested in pensioner housing for many, many years. If you talk to anyone on the street, of which, if you remember rightly, a couple of years ago, I talked about the fact that I actually did a survey, non-scientific survey of 85 people, whether councils should be in the business of pensioner houses. I never got one that said no. 85 people told me yes. Now, that's anecdotal, but that survey may end up coming to fruition somewhere along the line in a manner that we need to take it and get it done properly. But the reality is we are in that space, we are there, and we need to manage it efficiently. And we are doing that. and we are upgrading what we have, which we haven't done for many years. So we are doing those things. To do that, we need resource to make that happen. Now, Rob's doing the best he can with the staff that he has. He's well under-resourced at the present time. There's 3 staff gone from his area. Now, we need to make sure that if we're going to get to the end of this and have some sensible things come out the other end, particularly on a $2.5 million budget that we have there to do something with, that it damn well is the right thing to do. And this group will determine the directions that will hopefully be set and supported by council in the future. So I actually urge you to support the financial contribution, if you like, by way of resourcing to make sure that this working party and our council can move forward in this space. Otherwise, we will just sit there and have this same conversation in 12 months' time.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. So I'll now put A through to L, and I'll take him separately. All those in favour, please say, or please raise your hand. Those against? So that's carried. We now come to M. I'll put in. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay. Those against? I declare that carried. So, okay. Do you wish your vote recorded, Councillor Barnett? Thank you. So your vote recorded against, correct? Yep. All right. Thank you. So thank you, Simon and Rob. We now come to item 8.3, which is the submission on the resource management national environmental standards. That's pages 254 to 253. Colin, you're leading us in this here. Thank you.
Thank
Along
you.
with Haley, I think, is joining as well from the looks of things.
Yep, Haley's just joined us. So yeah, thanks for considering this report. The purpose is to gain Council's approval of the submission to the Ministry for the Environment on the National Environmental Standard for Sources of Human Drinking Water, which is being consulted on at the moment. An update to this standard was recommended as an outcome of the Havelock North inquiry report and recommendations. So it's been coming for a long time, and as part of the overall suite of changes to drinking water regulation. And considering the consultation material, we worked closely with colleagues at Selwyn District Council because we, as councillors, we've got similar interests, and it was a good way to share thoughts on this. And we also worked with a technical expert to help guide our submission as well. It is fair to say that the consultation document and the submission is pretty technical in nature. So and it's pretty comprehensive too. They asked 41 questions of us. So I've attached the full submission, which is the 41 questions that we've been asked and our responses to them. And I definitely won't go through all 41, but I thought I could highlight a few key points and then take questions on any others. So one of the points we noted is that we're being asked to submit on what protections should there be in this zone and this zone and this zone in terms of catchments for drinking water sources. But it felt like there's a little bit of a lack of clarity for what each different zone was trying to achieve. So that was one of the key points. We felt that if we're going to need to we give effect to the standard in terms of the protection to our drinking water sources, we need to understand clearly what each of these areas is trying to achieve. And that's also in the interest of national consistency and efficiency as well. A second point we made is that there is a bit of an issue of timing and sequencing with this work when considering this alongside other things like the Water Services Act. So this piece of legislation would require regional councils ultimately to be the ones that determine what the sources of human drinking water are and then inform water suppliers. But this is still being consulted on. And in the meantime, we've got the Water Services Act telling drinking water suppliers to prepare source water risk management plans and input that to water safety plans by November this year. So we're already doing work in this space, even though this legislation is going to ultimately tell the regional councils to do some of this work. So our key point we've made, because the Ministry for the Environment can't change that because the Water Services Act has already been passed. So the only point we're trying to make is that it needs to be acknowledged this will be an iterative process. We'll do what work we can this year, and that'll inform this year's water safety plans. But then there will be, because it's quite a scientific process and involves modelling, there will no doubt be further iterations of these source water risk management areas in the future as science gets better or as we get more input from regional councils as well. And the third key point that I wanted to highlight was we're pointing out there needs to be to go alongside a standard that says this is how you determine what the catchment of the source is and this is the risks that there might be. There needs to be some way to give legal effect to that so that you can actually change the land use or activities taking place rather than just identify that there's a hazardous activity happening. So it's not explicitly covered what will happen next other than identify the catchment, identify the hazards, but then there needs to be some more guidance on what happens once you've done that. You identify there is this activity that might impact on the source. There needs to be some way to give protection to that source, and it's not clear how that would be. My submission point on that is it would need to be done by regional councils through a plan change process. But in terms of the submission, my point is just they need to give thought to that. Otherwise, it's not a worthwhile document on its own. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thanks, Colin. Any questions? Councillor Brian, you've still got your hand up, so you might just want to take that down when you've got a moment, unless you have a question, of course. No questions. We've got a series of recommendations. Sorry, Hayley, did you want to add anything to Colin's report? What he said?
No, I think he's done a pretty good summary, thanks.
Yes, he's done an excellent job. Thank you. Agree. Okay, someone prepared to move the recommendation? Councillor Redmond, seconded by Councillor Atkinson. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Redmond?
Just briefly to say it's a very comprehensive report, Colin. A lot of it's over my head, and I'm grateful we have people who understand this. So it is a good submission, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to speak? Any further speakers? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Or raise your hand, sorry. So force a habit, really. Contrary, put your hand up. Are you all for, Councillor Barlow, or are you against? You're for? So, yes, thank you. All right, I declare that carried. Thank you. So next is item 8.4. So that's an update of resource management and association delegations, I would say. It says association delegations. So that's a report in the name of Tracy and Matt. Are they here? It's Matt. Matt, are you speaking for Tracy, or is Tracy to join us? Matt, you're still on mute.
There we go, found the button finally. I believe that I will be speaking for Tracy for this one, so happy to do so. Just by way of very quick introduction, this is a light review of delegations. And I suppose the one thing that I'd like to point out as well, there's quite a number of changes to the delegation structure. It's actually just following current custom and practice and just tidying up some of the specific delegations. Does introduce a number of new delegations to a number of staff, but it doesn't really change how we would do things in practice. So with that being said, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions? Councillor Redmond? Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. On paragraph 3.5, where you've listed the main changes, bullet point 4, a new delegation to the District Planning and Regulation Committee. What exactly is the agreement there that you're referring to?
Oh, excellent. So there is no current agreement for a mana whakahono o rohe agreement, but that is in the event that council do decide to, or get requested to and do decide to approve an agreement. It just allows for that to be formally signed off, but we currently don't have any requests for such an agreement.
Oh, could you actually explain to me what that agreement is?
Sure. It's the process was introduced in 2017, and it allows for council and a relevant iwi authority to enter into an agreement, and the terms of that agreement can be quite wide-ranging. If I was to equate it, it could be, for example, very similar to a memorandum of understanding that we have with the Runanga at the moment. To give an example, the West Coast Regional Council have an agreement with iwi authorities over there, which looks at how they will deal with consenting arrangements, so the practicalities of consultation and what have you. So it could be a very wide-ranging matters that are covered by the agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Mealings?
Hi, Matt. That's quite the table you've got there. So on page 361, you've got under section 110, the power to refund financial contributions to consent holders where consent has lapsed, and we've got the PDU manager included in that now. So is that is not currently a delegation that they have, is that correct? Because I know that is an issue we're dealing with at the moment.
Yeah, so that would technically come through just the normal RMA delegations, because a financial contribution is actually imposed under the Resource Management Act. But yes, that is a new delegation to that manager, who would be probably the one that's working through the negotiations with that anyway.
I'm wondering if we actually, pending how things go with this particular report when it gets put to the vote, if that might actually resolve some other issues that we have in this meeting further on. Sure. But also further to that, on page 362 regarding section 176A2, where we have delegations to waive the requirement for an outline plan. I presume that refers to early in the process and not waivers to be issued on agreed ODPs after they're already operative.
Yeah, so normally, so the Act does provide for waivers to outline plans where they're operative. And to give you a practical example of what might happen there, if a school was looking to replace a playground that was shown on an outline plan with another playground, so they're upgrading their playground, technically that would require a change to the outline plan. But of course, it's something that we would normally do as a waiver to that plan. So it's just a really minor works that there's no real point in doing a full outline plan approval process for.
So say in the case of, say, ODP 160, if people are seeking a change to that, like, is this a delegation which would allow that to be altered?
Yes, so that's different. So that's an outline, like an outline plan map within our district plan. This is an outline plan approval for a designation. So yeah, where you've got a designated site, you have an outline plan. So it's a little bit confusing.
Okay, no, that's great. I just wanted to just clarify that and make sure that was the case. Thanks, Matt.
Sure, no problem.
Any further questions? Matt, just before I call for a move, we should just record formally congratulations on your promotion. Something very well deserved. Don't want to see you actually go from your current role, because you're doing an excellent job on that one, but congratulations on your new role, and we look forward to working with you in that new capacity. So well done. Much deserved.
Thank you.
So we've got a recommendation here. Someone prepared to move? Moved Councillor Mealing, seconded by Councillor Redmond. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Mealings?
Only to say that, you know, this is quite a comprehensive suite of common sense recommendations, and I've gone through them myself with a fine-tooth comb, as you probably picked up, and I think that they actually are quite sensible, and for the most part really just formalize things that we've already been doing anyway, but make it easier and more streamlined, I suppose. So yes, well done, and I hope that you will support the recommendation.
Councillor Redmond?
Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
And I support this. I think there's a whole lot of tidy ups, and it's a formalising delegations that makes perfect sense. So commend Tracy and team for bringing this forward, because it's always helpful to know that there is a delegation in place and it's correct. So this has been a really good piece of work, and obviously a lot of work to put it together. So commend the staff for that. Further speakers? Do you wish to speak? Sorry, is right of reply, Councillor Mealings? No? Okay, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Contrary? I declare that carried. Thank you. Next is thanks, Matt. Next is 8.5, which is a report in the name of Rob, which is Rural Land Lease and Licence Policy. Rob, are you there? His name is there, so I should have a post camera on. Rob, Mr. Hawthorne's there. I actually have a question I'd like to ask at the front end of this, which I raised with Rob earlier, so which may negate us discussing this today. Maybe we just come back to 8 point. Oh, yeah, Rob, you're there.
Sorry.
Can you, do you want your camera on or not?
Yeah, I'm just about to put it on. Sorry, I didn't realize. I thought you were still on the previous meeting. I'll just put it on now. My apologies. I just took it. Just had another call at the same time. Apologies for that.
Rob, can I just ask you a question at the front end, because maybe we may not consider that today as a consequence of that. I raised with you earlier that in the property group report, page 391, it says iwi in consultation. It indicates that the policy, well, the property group indicated we should consult on this with with Ngāi Hariri. I note in the report it says that it didn't feel we needed to. So I just wanted to deal with that up front, because if we haven't appropriately dealt with that, then I think we should lay this on the table so we have had that feedback before we consider this report. And welcome just initially your answer to that before I'd asked you to speak to the report.
So we, in relation to the question of whether we have or not, we haven't specifically liaised with them on the report and the policy. And I'm very comfortable to do so. I am not entirely sure. I did try and find the reference that I didn't have the specific reference, and I had difficulty spotting it just earlier on this afternoon. I've had a couple of other things land on the plate, but I don't believe there is any legislative obligations on us in relation to the consultation, but it is certainly a sensible and reasonable thing to do, and I'm more than comfortable if in fact it's the decision of council to look at moving this to putting it on the table for the next meeting, to have that liaison with them.
If we did lay it on the table to make sure that we have followed things properly, it's page 391 of the property group report. Would that hold anything up? It's already a little delayed from where it was originally.
Yeah, so certainly the implications are modest. Most of these leases are $200 or $300 and sometimes less, and so they are not significant spend in their own right. So I think if that there's no criticality from that point of view.
Well, then I think I'm going to move that we lay this on the table, which pending consultation with Ngāi Hariri. Someone prepared to second that. It's procedural. Councillor Atkinson. I'm going to put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hand, sorry. Contrary, I declare that carried. So that'll just lay on the table pending that consultation. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
Thanks, Rob. I have no matters referred from committees or community boards. We're now at item 10.1, which is the Chief Executive's report on health, safety and wellbeing. I'll ask the Chief Executive who wishes to speak to his report.
I'll take the report as read and I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for the Chief Executive? There appears to be none. There's a recommendation contained in the report. Someone prepared to move. Are you moving or asking a question, Councillor Redmond?
I had a question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm getting used to technology.
We're all reacquainting ourselves. Thank you.
Jim, just on page 437, paragraph 4.2.7, you talk about COVID. I wondered, has there been any thought or decision on when vaccine passport mandates may be reconsidered, given that COVID is now endemic in the community?
Good question. We have just recently decided to mandate vaccination access to all of our campuses. There was a conversation yesterday with chief executives around the Canterbury region about when we might look at lifting. But if you actually look at the progression of the disease, then the next 6 to 8 weeks, it's going to peak. And we haven't got there yet. The numbers are increasing every day. On the 25th of July, for example, there was about 103 or 6 cases in waimakariri district. 2 days later, I think it was about 170 or something. So now's, and as the Prime Minister said, now's not the time to lift defences, because the mixture of vaccine passes, as well as all the personal things that we can do, masks, washing hands and so on, together means that we will reduce the transmission of this virus. The other point to note is that in a world context, we have the largest number of people per exposure. So it's about an R1 at 3.7. So for every person who has Omicron who comes into contact with someone, about 3.7 are being infected. The next highest country is Myanmar, then we've got China, Indonesia, and another one. So the point about that is, without vaccination, without those personal measures that I've talked about, for the next 2 months, we're all quite significantly at risk. But because of the high vaccination rate that we have at the moment, it's giving us a good opportunity for that peak, once it arrives, to come down quite quickly. So as an executive team, we're going to monitor this weekly. But when you put all of that together for at least the next 6 weeks, it doesn't make any sense to lift vaccination pass requirements.
Thank you. I have a second question on a different topic. On page 441 in Diligent, Appendix A, the last item on the page refers to a near miss with a staff member slipping outside the Kaiapoi Library. That has been the topic of social media in Kaiapoi, and other people have indicated that they feel that area is quite slippery. Are any steps being taken to address the tile surface to make it less slippery?
I'll need to come back to you on that, Councillor.
Thank you. It's just been a matter of concern, and I wondered what would happen if a member of the public...
Sandra, you've just shared your screen. Do you think you could unshare yourself, please?
I thought I'd disappeared. I just wondered what the reporting process would be, Jim, if a member of the public fell in similar circumstances.
Well, they would be, assuming our staff was aware of them falling, then they would be obliged to lodge that as an incident. So it would end up in this reporting system.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just further to what Jim said around the decision was made around the vaccine passes, there will be a communication that comes out to all elected members in the next day or so, just to confirm that. And as I said earlier, for the foreseeable future, we'll convert all our meetings to Zoom. Don't intend that to be something that continues beyond where necessary, but just at the moment, we've seen that as the wise course of action. Councillor Barnett, you had a question? Followed by Councillor Doody.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've just seen that the CBAC is actually opening in Coldstream Road tomorrow. Have we been given any communications to that happening for testing locally?
No, it's Thursday, I'm told. I don't think it's tomorrow, but I haven't had anything formally, no. So when we do,
this is,
well, no, I'm only
from
going.
GC.
Okay, well, that's fine, but I'm advised differently. So I have asked CDHB to make sure that they do issue some communications, and Matt's not the source, it's CDHB that's the source here. So they need to confirm that, but that came via Tessa, I think. But I don't want to speculate on that on a public meeting. So we'll make sure CDHB do communicate that, which I've asked them to. Thank you. But I appreciate the community's desire to have a testing station, and we have been pushing really hard that that happens through CDHB, through our contacts, and we've made our land in buildings, if necessary, available. So our staff have been working really proactively in that space. Okay, further questions? Councillor Doody.
Thank you. I'm just on the same page 441, and the third bullet point down about the aquatic lifeguard and the behaviour of parents and children. I'm just hoping that this incident doesn't happen again. And so what has been put in place to protect the staff of a further incident like that?
Well, I think Chief Executive answered that before. He's going to look into that and come back.
To check that one as well.
So he'll come back to there'll be a response that comes back to all of us. Perhaps Jim, the Kaiapoi Community Board as well, who'd be interested in that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? We have a recommendation. Who would like to move? Move to Councillor Doody, seconded by Councillor Redmond. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Doody? Councillor Redmond? Any further speakers? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, sorry. Contrary, declare that carried. So next committee minutes for information. We've got the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee of the 15th of February, pages 447 to 452. It's just a recommendation that they be received for information. Councillor Atkinson, looks like you're moving that. Seconded, Councillor Ward. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Got a series of community board minutes, 12.1 to 12.3, to be received for information. Councillor Williams is moving. Seconded, Councillor Atkinson. Do you wish to speak? No. No speakers. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare, sorry, raise your hand. I declare that carried. The next is my diary, which is pages 475 to 478. It's a recommendation here. Is there any questions? Someone prepared to move? Move to Councillor Ward. Seconded, Councillor Atkinson. Do you wish to speak? So no further speakers. With that, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, aye. Wave your hand. Contrary, declare that carried. So we now come to council portfolio updates. The first is iwi relationships, and ask members if you could keep to the 3-minute guide would be helpful. And Jim will give us an indication on that. Just on iwi relationships, it's fair to say there's a bit going on in the space with regards to Three Waters. As you'll be aware, Ngāi Tahu certainly have a view around the entity-based model versus the model that Communities for Local Democracy are presenting. So in my role with our local iwi, there's a lot of discussion going on in that space, but I have nothing really further to update apart from we had a meeting recently with Tamari and Gabe here at the council with other partner mayors, and it was an encouraging conversation, and there's a lot more work to be done in that space. It's fair to say, certainly in the space of Three Waters. Happy to answer any questions. Okay, Greater Christchurch Partnership. Do either Nikki or Neville want to speak, or you want me to do that? Just to say that there's, again, a lot of work going on with that Urban Growth Partnership. There's transport-related conversations, which I updated at UNR last week around Connect Approach. We've got a meeting with the Minister on the 30th of March. But the partnership's in good shape. There's a lot of work going on there, particularly with the work streams, GC 2050, and those other matters that we've been working on for some time, and they're all starting to come together, but we're at the real crunch point. It's really good to see Catherine Snock back after maternity leave, and it's really good to see the rigour that she brings back in that space. Anna Alfric and others are doing a really good job and have done a very good job in that space and continue to do so. But you know, to get the aspirations around the spatial planning work done, there's requiring quite a lot of work, and we've got a lot of our staff working in that space too. And we had a briefing on that at DPNR the other day, so you're aware of where that's, well, where the likely areas are, and that will be there'll be further conversation on that in due course and at partnership level. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Canterbury Water Management Strategy, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Nothing much to report in on the strategy. There hasn't been a meeting since we last met as a council because the zone committee is meeting every second month. But there's two issues I'd just like to bring up, and that is just for your information. We have, I'm dealing with residents that are on the on private wells on the Wood End Rangiora Road, whose water supply is now exceeding the drinking water standards for arsenic, iron and manganese, and they want to join. There's half a dozen of them, and they want to join into the council public supply, which is a obviously sensible solution. And I would like to see, as I said to Kelly, when in fact costings are firmed up about what this is going to cost, that the consultation goes further than just this half dozen, because along that way there's lots of properties on private wells punctuated along that road. The groundwater in that area is not going to improve. In fact, it's getting worse, and now it doesn't comply with drinking water standards. So that's just a heads up. The other issue I wanted to talk about on the watery space is that I'm dealing with a resident in Sefton who has been flooded out 7 times in 3 years and evacuated in the last rain last month. The person was fully advised that a relocated house put into essentially what is a flood-prone area next to wetland, given all the information from the council staff, but decided to go ahead. She's been there 3 years and flooded 7 times. And I'm talking 1 metre high through the property, just under the floorboards of the house. So the question being, when does the council say no to relocating or building a house on a hazard-prone site? Because the landowner, property owner in question here was at the meeting ECAN last night on flooding in Sefton, on the Sefton Ashley rating district, and now is talking about wanting the council to buy her out so that she can move on. So just putting it out there.
Well,
when do we say no?
Matter that should be dealt offline. I know our staff.
Oh yes, there's.
It's really. I understand what you're saying, but it's really out just a little outside of the portfolio update here. So can we'll have that discussion in another forum, not here right now.
Certainly.
Okay. Your time was up anyway, but is there anything else you wanted to update?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Right. International relationships, Deputy Mayor Atkinson.
Is that working? Yes, it is. Right. We've just to let you know that we've postponed our meeting for Passchendaele until next month. In the closure of the Christchurch RSA, there was 4 medals which had come from Passchendaele and been placed in the Christchurch RSA. The consulate for Belgium has secured back those 4 medals, and they will be placed in the Rangiora RSA very shortly, of which we will all know about soon, and there'll be a ceremony in which I believe the consulate himself is coming down to dedicate the medals back in a place that they should be, as I believe there's two soldiers from Kaiapoi and 2 from Rangiora that received these medals, so they'll be put there. Nothing on the Chinese relationship that we have with Wuhan at the moment. That's fairly stagnant at the present time, and that's about me.
Thank you. Any questions of Councillor Atkinson? Thank you. Regeneration, Councillor Blackie.
Thank you. I've got very little to report that you don't already know. Bit of vandalism down on Norman Kirk playing fields. The hoons can't resist. As soon as the grass gets wet, they have to break through the perimeter fences and go and do wheelies on our playing field, but we're kind of used to that. The Mahanga Kai working group came to the Kaiapoi Community Board recently and outlined their plans for the Mahanga Kai area. Hannah Rose and the other landscapers have got the plan together, and that was well received. There's a few minor adjustments to do with the boundaries that they've drawn, whether they're Mahanga Kai land or not, but that's being addressed by Green Space staff. And otherwise, the plan is progressing nicely. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Any questions of Councillor Blackie? Thanks, Al. Next is climate change and sustainability, Councillor Mealings.
Yeah, so I have been informed that a number of energy reduction measures have been put in place in the Ashley building and the RSC, which has resulted in approximately 50% reduction in kilowatt hours with those efficiency gains, which over a period of 10 years is likely to be edging towards about $1 million, excluding carbon. One of the things that we need to be, I guess, aware of is that the spot price of carbon in the last year has nearly quadrupled from $22 to $85, and the impact on this hasn't been, has yet to be seen in the Waimakariri district because we don't have to be accountable for it yet, but we soon will be. So that's going to be something that we really do need to take into consideration. And I'll leave that on detail at the moment, but also I would point out that we have finally just been able to advertise for a few different advisor positions, one of which is the lead advisor sustainable development position, which has just gone live yesterday and will be advertised for the next 4 weeks. And that is something that, as you all know, I'm quite excited about, because it will just give us a lot more capacity to prioritize and begin advancing our climate change and sustainability work programs, because this area has been stalled for quite some time. And I'm quite anxious to see it get underway again, because it's not really something that's going away, and it's something we need to get moving on again. So I'm looking forward to that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions of Nikki? It's quite an achievement for the building, actually, Nikki. So might be worth the team
Hats off to
talking
Linda.
to our comm staff about at some point. But it's quite an achievement. So yeah. Okay. Business promotion in town centres, Councillor Ward.
Thank you. It's been quite busy. We've just started our meetings, a small committee with the Bank of New Zealand divestment, so we're underway with that and starting to progress and to gain momentum so that we can activate that. So that's underway. Regular promotions, we've with no events happening, everything being cancelled, of course, there's not a lot happening there at the moment. Rangiora Airfield, I think we're bringing forward a safety officer to the airfield with some safety concerns and our responsibility as owners of the airfield. So we're underway with that. And today we met with our consultant from Taupo this morning, Paul and I, and some people. So that's getting underway. It's going to be a big job there for us to comply with civil aviation and to make sure that the waimakariri district, that our responsibilities at the airfield, that we're compliant. The only other thing is that with I could really report is that with the tender openings, that inflation, shortage of product, and shortage of labour and busyness of a lot of our contractors with our shovel-ready projects is making our tender openings okay, but of course a little more expensive than we would like. But that's just what's happening in this environment right now. So that's from me.
Okay, any questions of Councillor Ward? Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of council portfolio updates. I have no questions under standing orders, no urgent general business under standing orders. The next items are to be dealt with in public excluded, but before we go into public excluded, I think we'll just, we have a 15-minute break, give yourself a cup of tea and a stretch. We're back by 3:05. So we'll catch up again in a minute. Thank you, everyone.